Proposition 218 says is, don't think about increasing any taxes or even changing any taxes without going to the voters for approval. Now, what is the telephone user tax? Right now, all of us living in the city of Los Angeles are paying a 10% tax on telephone bills that are billed to City of Los Angeles addresses. So your cell phone is billed to your office in Long Beach, you're not paying on that. If your cell phone is billed to your office in Los Angeles, you are paying a 10%. At various points in time, we've said, we don't care where the billing address is if the telephone call originates or terminates in the city of Los Angeles. So the person receiving the call or making the call is physically located within the geographical perimeter of Los Angeles. We want to tax that call. This is telephone tax revenues for the city since 1995. And the only thing I really wanted to point out here was notice how it's flattening out. And this is really a problem for the city and for those of us that count on the city to provide police and fire and so on and so forth. And really what's happening here is, we've all gone to those kinds of telephone, especially cell phone plans that say for X dollars a month we get unlimited calls. You see how cell phone revenues here were sort of, zero, because none of us had cell phones back in these days, and they sort of climbed precipitously when we were all paying $32 a minute for our cell phones. And then suddenly we all go to these flat plans, and as a result, city tax revenues have also flattened out. And that has the impact, and that actually is painful for the city because it has revenues. But the point was, there have been various technological changes, as I mentioned. Then the voters passed this new rule about 218 that says don't change it without voter approval, and subsequently the feds changed the rules. So really the situation that we're in is, through no fault of the cities, as a result of federal changes and changes in technology and so on and so forth, and courts interpreting 218, the net result is that we have to come to the voters, the city has to come to the voters to say, okay, here's the modern tax, here's what we propose to do, is it okay? I think one of the things you'll hear from Mr. Moore subsequently, which we can talk about in rebuttal if you want, is simply that the tax is invalidated. No, it hasn't been invalidated. Certainly the courts have said you can't do X, you must do Y. So I'm not going to say that there aren't legal challenges going on to the thing right now, but the tax that we are collecting, the city is collecting this minute, is not illegal. It is under duress, it is being challenged, but that litigation has not yet worked its way through the courts. But the point is, many other cities are actually doing exactly what we're doing here for exactly the same reasons. The litigation that could invalidate the existing tax, there are two pieces of litigation here that are likely to come to trial at these dates. So it was clear to us that, depending on how you predict this litigation is going to come out, sooner or later, we were going to need to go to the voters. So what the proposal, Measure S proposal, is it would reduce the rate to 9%. It provides new definitions, so it's a modern technology. We're no longer just drafting the tax to apply only to the kind of POTS, plain old telephone service, is the kind of regular telephone service. It applies to a much broader base of things. The main thing is, as you've probably seen in the mailers you might have gotten, is that it does expand to encompass what are called private networks, which are now not currently taxed under the ordinance. There is a federal statute that says no tax on the internet, so to the extent that you're paying $20 a month to Yahoo DSL for DSL service, etc., you will not be taxed on the $20 a month that you're paying for that service. The new ordinance, if it's passed by a majority vote, will replace the old ordinance. If it does not, the existing ordinance, which is under challenge in the legal system, would remain in place until that is resolved. And the last thing I just wanted to cover briefly is you'll hear some talk about, just say no and it'll force something. And the only thing I really would like people to focus on very briefly is the consequence of the numbers, or just hang with me while we walk through the math. $270 million for the city is a huge amount of money. And the point I was trying to make here is, let's suppose salaries right now, 80% of the city budget. So if you were to say, okay, let's cut $270 million out of the budget, you can't cut $270 million by just cutting expense and equipment or other kinds of things. You'd have to cut those items by 40, 50%. So really what happens if this does not pass is you're looking at layoffs. Now, you may believe layoffs are good. I personally believe layoffs would have a very deleterious impact on the services that we rely on for our city.
Why are we losing so many industries? You ever hear of anyone opening a new factory lately? No. What you hear instead is factories leaving the area, jobs leaving the area. Between 2001 and 2007, if you counted all the American citizens moving into LA and subtracted all the American citizens moving out, you have a flight of about 500,000 American citizens. The city recognizes this, and the city council appointed a task force. They said, what's going on? There's a bunch of dead canaries in the coal mine. The rats are leaving the ship. There's signs of trouble. Guess what the number one reason that city council's own task force came up with for why we are hemorrhaging good employers, factories, etc. Rhymes with faxes. Taxes. Green bar represents the increase in annual revenues, $1.4 billion a year. Now that number is too big for a human being to comprehend, so let me break it down to a daily figure for your lottery fantasies. $3.8 million a day. The city gets in $3.8 million every single day. Weekends, vacations, Thanksgiving. $3.8 million per day more than just a few years ago. You see the little yellow and blue bar over on the side? That's the total amount of revenue that the cell phone tax and the landline tax bring in. See the little tiny Lego blue bar on the other side? That is the annual salary for 1,000 new police officers. So when the Prop S proponents tell you we have to have this tax, or we're going to have to let policemen go and shut down fire departments, it is baloney. The city is awash in cash, and they've been dreaming up stupid ways to spend it. The most galling example to me, I don't mind being taxed to help someone who's handicapped, who's had a hard time, something like that. I do mind being taxed to give money to people who make more money than I do. Millionaires, for example, the downtown developers who are financing the Yes on Prop S campaign. They get hundreds of millions of dollars in tax subsidies. You, however, are supposed to keep paying more taxes. After the city council put this measure Proposition S, on the ballot in October, December they turn around and enter a brand new 5-year contract, longer than previous contracts, 5-year contract with labor unions to give them a 25% pay raise. Anybody here get a 5-year 25% pay raise lately? For the millionaire developers, you don't have to lay off anyone. You have to quit giving money to the special interests that finance the campaigns of the career politicians we have in office. Let's see the annual amount of revenues that the city takes in each year. Anyone? Bueller? $6.7 billion every single year. This attractive pie chart shows how the money is spent. The big blue area is the amount of money we spend on police. The red area is the amount we spend on the fire department. The huge green chunk of pie, that represents the extra $1.4 billion that the city gets each year now that it didn't back in the 2004-2005 budget. So somehow, just a few years ago, we made it without that giant green chunk, but now you're asked to believe if we don't have the cell phone tax and the landline tax, the city's going to go to anarchy. Well, you see the little tiny slivers of yellow and aquamarine pie? That's our old friend, the cell phone tax and the landline tax. Of course the city can make it without this money. Why then the big proposal, the big program, the big propaganda to get you to agree to it? Because the labor unions and the developers who have contributed $2.3 million for a massive advertising campaign, they like the gravy train. First they say, well, it's not a tax cut, it's a reduction, and that's even in the voter handout, right? Who could object to this? It says, shall an ordinance be adopted to reduce the city's tax on communications users from 10 to 9%? So it sounds like a tax cut, right? Wrong. Courts have already thrown out chunks of the cell phone tax because the city raised the cell phone tax in March 2003 without your approval. It is not a fair and equal tax. You will pay 9%, telemarketers 5%. LA Times on cell phone and wireless, 0%. It is a scam to rip you, the taxpayer, off, and it is a job killer. My time is up.